good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. It's afternoon here, maybe it's evening, maybe it's morning where you are. It's great to see so many people here. So thank you for the lovely introduction, Monica. My name is Jade, and I'm in Chester in the UK, and it's afternoon here. So welcome and thank you for joining us. So today we're going to be talking about using images to explore culture. And I'll be asking you to participate throughout the session by sharing your ideas in the chat box. So please do get involved. So here are the aims for today's session. So we're going to explore what culture means and why it matters. We're going to consider the value of images in language learning. And we're going to introduce some classroom activities for teenagers using images to explore culture. So let's start off with the first of these points. So on your screen, you should see, if everything's going well, a big blue screen. Can you see that? With a QR code in the top left-hand corner. Yeah, fantastic. So you can scan that QR code with your camera, with your phone camera, or if you haven't got your phone, if you're just on the computer, you can go to the website slido.com and it will ask you to enter a code. And the code is on the screen here. It's 1639807. So the question here on the Slido is, what words come to mind when you think about the word culture? And we've got some people typing already. We've got someone's written richness. So the code there is just to access the right Slido. So the answers for the questions are about what do you think of when you think about the word culture? And I can see that people are typing in the chat box as well. That's great. So lots of things coming up. And the biggest word you can see on the screen at the moment is diversity. That means the most number of people who are participating have written diversity. You can go back, you can write as many words as you like. So we've got some fantastic stuff here. So we've got identity. That's really important, really interesting. So lifestyles, paintings, art, intercultural learning, customs, mindsets. That's nice. Music, and of course, food. Traditions coming up pretty big there as well. Intercultural, yet good and bad. Richness, empathy. Glad to see that's there. So some of you have been listening to Dave's session. You've obviously picked up some things from there, which is great. Lovely. Okay, it's nice to see that moving. It's nice to get an idea of what your understanding of culture is. So I'm going to stop that poll for the moment, and I'm going to show you a couple of definitions. So thank you for sharing your ideas. So the first definition that I think gives a fairly thorough explanation is from UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization. And they describe culture as this. I'll give you a moment just to read that. So some overlap with some of your ideas there. A few people said literature, lifestyles, traditions was a pretty big one, and beliefs. And this is a nice comprehensive definition. Let's have a look at a shorter definition. So this is from the Macmillan Dictionary. A set of ideas, beliefs, and ways of behaving of a particular organization or group of people. So notice this is about a particular organisation or group of people. It's not necessarily about national culture. It can also be regional culture or local culture. So the culture in your school, for example, the set of ideas, beliefs and ways of behaving might be different to the culture in another school. So it's quite a broad term. We're looking at lots of different things. Now, the social psychologist Geert Hofstede describes culture as how you were raised. He says that it develops while you grow up. And he uses a computer metaphor to describe culture as the software of our minds. I really like this metaphor. And he says that we need a shared software in order to communicate effectively. So culture is about what we share with those around us. It's not just about what makes us different. And in practice, of course, when we interact with other people, culture constitutes the unwritten rules of the social game. So this is a very nice way of looking at it, looking not only at what makes us different, but also about the things that we share. So we've looked a little bit about what culture means. And now I'd like to get an idea of where it fits into your classrooms. So there's a question for you on the screen here. Please feel free to contribute in the chat box. So the question is, who are your students going to be speaking English with in the future? So what will they need English for? What kind of contexts will they use it in? Okay, so we've got some answers coming in. We've got work, lots of people saying work, employers, colleagues, other students, people from different countries. Wow, it's coming in really fast. Fantastic. There's students, perhaps, tourists. Okay, someone's written robots. Fantastic. So friends. Oh, someone's put an emoji of a globe there. That's really nice. And kind of focusing on the world aspect of this, the global aspect. Okay, thank you for your ideas. Lots of things coming in there. So, of course, a lot of our learners will be using English in the future when they're working or traveling internationally. And this means that they will be communicating with people from different cultures. Now, what you can see on the screen here, this is some research into how employers working in public, private, and non-profit sectors describe intercultural skills. And so they describe these skills as the ability to communicate with other people effectively, to demonstrate respect for others, to adapt to different cultural settings, and to understand different cultural contexts and viewpoints. So notice that intercultural skills aren't only about communication, but they're also about respect, about adapting, and about understanding. And of course, as teachers, part of our work is to help prepare our students for the future. And that means helping them to develop these skills. This quote that you can see on the screen now, this is from the Council of Europe. And I think I've chosen this because I think it highlights just how valuable intercultural skills can be. I'll give you just a moment to read the quote. And what I like about this particularly is this line, it's a means for learning about each other and from one another. So this is about preparing our students for the world and for the future. And if you were in Dave's session, then you might remember that he said secondary students are discovering the world. So this makes exploring culture really relevant and really meaningful to their lives. But of course, it's not only about how we are with others, it's about ourselves too. Because exploring and learning about different cultures prompts us to challenge the assumptions that we hold about our own behaviours and practices. We might assume that those are normal, that they're okay for everybody. So this encourages personal growth, and as lots of you have pointed out, it helps us to develop empathy. So we've looked at what culture means and why it's important, but of course this session is about images too. So let's turn our attention to thinking about images, and we'll start off with a question. So we're going to put a poll, will come up on your screen in a moment, and the question is, how often do you explore still images in your classroom? So you should be able to vote. There are 3 options. You can choose frequently, sometimes, or never. So hopefully that poll will be showing on your screen. Now, I can't see it on my screen. That might just be a technical thing. But I can see lots of you are putting answers in the chat box, and lots of people are saying A, frequently. We've got a few people saying B. Lots of A's and B's, fantastic. I don't, in the background there, have we got to, can anyone tell me if the poll is running? Not able to see it on my screen, but let's have a look at the results of that. Are we able to see the results of the poll? Okay, I haven't got the results of the poll here, but from the chat box, I'm guessing that most people, here we go. Okay, so it's just the question that's come up now, but I'm going to guess that most people have chosen A and B, because that's what most of you are saying in the chat box. So thank you for contributing there. And now for those of you that said frequently or sometimes, that said A or B, why do you explore images with your learners? You must see some value in using images. So what is that value? How do images support learning in your classroom? Let's get your ideas in the chat box. Okay, so we've got Simon saying visual memory. That's really important. Yeah, being able to remember. We've got critical thinking, saving times, nice. Visualization, it's going really fast here, some fantastic stuff. So we've got exploring, letting students explore, imagination, motivating, absolutely. Okay, so you've obviously got a good understanding of how the visuals can support learning. Thank you for your for your contribution. Some lovely stuff there. Now, what we know is that imagery plays a really central role in the way that humans make sense of the world. The human brain has evolved to learn and to develop in multisensory environments, and as such, all of our brain functions are interconnected. And neuroscience has confirmed the dominant role of visualization in human cognition. Now, half of the nerve fibers in our brains are linked to our vision. And when our eyes are open, vision accounts for 2/3 of electrical activity in the brain. So, because of that, instruction, teaching, is most effective and most memorable when it engages multiple senses. Which means that as soon as we bring imagery into learning, we're increasing the potential for our students to engage with, to understand, to process, and to remember information. So lots of overlap there with your ideas. So images enable us to bring the real world into the classroom. They make learning more interesting and more context-based, and they allow information to be stored in the brain in visual form as well as in linguistic form. Now, in 1969, so this is more than 50 years ago, a chap called Rudolf Arnheim, he was a writer, theorist, and psychologist. He said something which I think is still very true today, which is, unless the stuff of the senses remains present, the mind has nothing to think with. And so for me, this is about creating different routes into comprehension and different routes into learning and into engagement and into memory. So we've had a look at what culture means and why it matters. And we've had a look at how visuals can support learning. Now let's have a look at how we can bring these two things together in the classroom. So I'm going to share some activities with you. We're going to have a look at 6 different activities. And some of these I will talk you through, and some of them I will ask you to try out and to share your ideas in the chat box. Now, with each of these activities, you can source images yourself. You can bring stuff from home, stuff that you found online, or you can use images from the course book, which is what I've done here. These images are all from Gateway to the World. Or you can get students to find their own images and to bring those into the classroom. So let's start with the first of these activities. So this activity is called Perspectives. So have a look at the picture on your screen here. This picture was taken in Siam Square in Bangkok, in Thailand. And I'd like you to think about what adjectives would you use to describe the people in the image. So just share your ideas with us in the chat box. So we've got lots of people saying happy, fantastic. They do look really happy, don't they? Looks like lots of fun. We've got cheerful, excited, young, yeah, alive, nice, curious, smiling, friendly, teenagers, okay, energetic, lovely, okay. And a couple of people are sort of starting to describe what they can see in the image as well. Girls choosing clothes, maybe shopping. So let me bring us to the next question, which is, what do you think might be important to the people in the image? What do you think might matter to them? Just give us your ideas in the chat box. I'm just going to mute myself for a moment while I have a little cough, because like Dave, I have a cold, so excuse me for a second. Okay, I'm back with you. So we've got shopping, lots of shopping, friendship, fashion, style, having fun, laughing, looking good, so appearance. So the things that might be important to the people in this image based on what you can see. And now your final question with this picture. What aspects of culture could you use this image to explore with your students? What aspects of culture Okay, so we've got fashion. How is fashion different in different cultures? We've got friendship, Donatella saying traveling abroad, lots of people saying fashion and school. Lovely. What women wear. Okay, so some gender explorations there as well. Hanging out. How do people spend their free time in different cultures? Social life, after school. Great. Okay, so you came up with the same ideas that I did. So I thought shopping habits would be a good one. Friendships, of course, and social groups, and maybe after school activities, because it looks like they're wearing the same uniform. And Elena's written tradition wearing clothes as well. That's quite interesting. Okay, so you don't have to answer these questions, but in class with students, what I would then do is invite them to choose one of the aspects of culture that they identified, so shopping habits, for example, and to choose one of the people in the image, and then either to write a short text or to make a short voice recording or a video from the perspective of that person about the cultural aspect that they chose. So they might, for example, choose the girl in the middle talking about how she feels about shopping habits and what's important to her. And you could also invite students to write about that aspect of culture from their own perspective and to consider how this might differ from that of the person in the image. And so this activity is about getting students to explore and consider different cultural perspectives on different things, such as lifestyle, values, or behaviors. And you'll see that with a lot of these activities, it's about exploring. We're using images to explore culture. Okay, let's have a look at another activity. So I'm going to show you another image. Look closely at this picture. And I'd like you to think about cultural norms in different countries. So what is normal in one country that might be different in another country? And I'd like you to think of words or phrases that relate to national culture and what you can see in the picture. Okay, so we've got Donatella, safety rules, Jessica, gender rules, like a work. We've got females working in a car shop. Okay, maybe female mechanic. Is that different in another culture, for example? So gender roles, female work, equality, gender differences, traditions, again, overlapping with the work element, work ethics, dress code. Lovely, some fantastic ideas. You're coming up with lots more than I did. So the three main things that I identified for this were types of jobs. So is it, what sort of types of jobs do people do typically? Education and training. So typically in the culture, do people follow a certain education path? Do they go into more practical training, skills-based work? And of course, as many of you have said, gender roles in society as well. So lots of things that you could explore. So once students have written down 3 words or phrases, then I would ask them to choose one of those words and phrases. And so I've put types of jobs here as an example. And I would invite them to explore similarities and differences between their own culture and either another culture or the culture that they can see in the image. And so I've used a Venn diagram for this. So just in case you haven't used a Venn diagram before, really useful for motivating students and focusing their attention on what to put down on the paper. And the place where the 2 circles overlap, this is where we would put similarities and then differences either side. And of course, you could extend this into a research project for students to find out more about how this varies in different cultures. And remember, this isn't only about identifying differences, but it's also about what we share, what goes into that middle space. Okay, let's move on and have a look at another activity. So this is called challenging assumptions, which I think is a very important aspect of exploring culture. So we're going to start by looking at this picture. And the question is, what cultural assumptions might you make about the people in this image? What would you assume based on the picture about their culture? So this was taken at a market in the Czech Republic. Okay, so we've got a few people saying family connections. So maybe you might look at this image and assume that family members do the shopping together. It looks like these people might be a mother and daughter. We've got healthy eating habits. Healthy food is coming up quite a lot. So yeah, maybe in this culture, people eat very healthily compared to another culture. We've got women's roles come up again. Interesting. So who does the shopping? Who's responsible for doing the shopping in your culture, in your family, or in your local region, or in your country? Lots of people saying healthy food, supporting local business. Nice. Missed the name there, but that's a great idea. Shopping at markets, perhaps, is there as well. Lovely. Okay. So what we've done is we've asked students to make assumptions about people in the image. There's a few examples on the screen here. Family members do the shopping together. People buy their food at markets. So you've said a lot of these things. But what's really important to remember is this. We understand images through the filter of our own cultural experience. So our own beliefs and our own values give meaning to what we're looking at, to the content of images. And of course, making assumptions isn't enough. It's not enough to just make an assumption about a culture. We need to find out more. So what I would ask students to do is to think about the assumptions that they made and to reframe those assumptions into questions that they can explore. So let's have an example here. So we've got family members do the shopping together and people buy their food at markets. Maybe these are assumptions that we made or the students wrote down. And then turning those around into questions, we might say, who do people in your culture typically shop with? Where do people in your culture usually buy their food? And remember that exploring culture necessitates an understanding of our own culture. So we can start by asking students to answer these questions for themselves about their own culture. So if we focus in on one question, who do people in your culture typically shop with? We've reframed it from an assumption into a question. We've opened it up and we can explore this more deeply. So we can ask students, okay, who do people in your culture typically shop with? Maybe they typically shop with their parents. How do you feel about this? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Why? And what do you find challenging about it? So going deeper into those questions and then going back to the picture. So taking students back to the image, back to the assumptions they made, and looking at their own answers and comparing, how is this different from what you can see in the image? How might this be different for people in other cultures? And importantly, how can you find out more? Okay, so that was challenging assumptions. We're going to move on to another activity now. I'm going to explain it to you and we'll try out just a little bit of it so you get a sense of it. So this is the weather model. Now, the weather model was originally developed by a group of students in the field of social work, together with a social worker and educator called Siobhan Macmillan. And it was originally designed to facilitate reflective practice. So it's about reflecting and it's about thinking more deeply. And so I've adapted the weather model here for exploring culture through images. And so you can see on the screen, we've got several different weather types, and each of those weather types represents a question. And so I just skipped ahead there. Hopefully you can see the questions there on your screen. So sunshine is about what feels positive in the image. Rain is about what feels challenging or less positive. Fog is about what we can't see very clearly, so maybe something we find difficult to understand or associate with. Lightning is about surprise, what surprises you. And wind is about change, so how does the image change how you view your own or another culture? And you can use this with any image at all that has people engaging in some sort of activity, helping your students to explore these cultural aspects. So let's focus in on one of these. So I'm going to show you a picture now. You had a little sneak preview a minute ago. So here's the picture, and we're going to concentrate on lightning. So the question for lightning is, what surprises you in the image? So have a look at the image here and type your ideas into the chat box. What surprises you about this image? Okay, so Kelly is saying helping homeless. Maybe that doesn't happen normally in your culture, or maybe it happens in some cultures and not in others. We've got the girl kneeling. That's really interesting, Marina. Yeah, thank you. Fantastic. The sign might be surprising. So a few people are saying empathy here, people demonstrating empathy. Is it normal to see a young woman engaging at this level in the street with an older man who's maybe homeless. Um, the sign, few people are saying the sign. So yeah, so this guy's he's not begging, he's not asking for money. He's offering work for food. So why is that surprising? And how is that different in different cultures? So the weather model is really valuable for inspiring and facilitating discussion to get students thinking about and exploring both their own and other cultures. And of course, we've just looked at one question here, but there are the others on the previous slide as well. Okay, let's have a look at another activity. So this is called culture. Quite appropriately, find something. So we've got a picture on the screen, and the word culture serves as an acronym. So you're inviting students to look at the image and to find something relating to communication. Feel free to type your ideas, but you don't have to. I'm just going to talk you through it here. So something relating to communication and the way people communicate. So with this picture, you might say people communicate using devices, maybe with people outside the room, maybe with other people in the room. Something universal, or that they think is true for most people in most cultures. Something relating to lifestyle, something relating to time and the way that people spend their time. Something unacceptable, so something that they personally or that other people might find unacceptable. Something they can relate to or associate with. And finally, something relating to emotions and how different people might feel about particular aspects of a culture. So this is find something. And again, you can use this with any picture that shows people engaging in some kind of activity. So we've looked at several different activities, and I'd like to share one final activity with you. But this one's a little bit different, because rather than providing an image for students to explore, this activity invites students to create their own image. So here are the instructions for students that you can see on the screen. So I would ask students to take a photo which captures something about their cultural identity. Take a photo which gives an impression or a sense or a feeling of maybe a custom, a belief, a ritual, a value, a behavior, or an attitude that they associate with themselves and their cultural identity. So the students are not just bringing in pictures here, but they are creating pictures, taking photographs. And part of these instructions, we ask them to think about communication. So how can they communicate through their photograph something that helps people understand something about where they're from and what shapes their cultural identity? Also encourage them to think about creativity. So how can they use form and perspective in a photograph to highlight what makes us similar or what makes us different? And finally, a caption. So what caption will students write to accompany the photo, and how this helps people's understanding of the photo? And with this task, it's really important to remember that there's no right or wrong answer. The photographs that students produce are about starting a dialogue. So as long as they can justify their decisions in what they're communicating and how they're communicating it creatively, then we start to have that conversation. This is particularly useful in multicultural classes, or where your students are in contexts where they're able to communicate with other students around the world. So this is student snapshots. So we've had a look. We've got Noor saying that they've done this activity with students as a competition. That's fantastic. I hope it went really well, Noor. Okay, so we've looked at 6 different activities today. And I hope there's something here that you find useful that you can use with your students. So I'm just going to ask you to reflect for a moment. Just reflect on these activities that we've looked at. We've tried out some bits and pieces. Which of these can you see yourself using with your students? So share your ideas in the chat box. So Mice is saying I use them all, or I have used them all. Very creative. Great. Okay, so student snapshots, yeah, it's a really nice one, that, isn't it? Shifting it around, so using images, but students' own images. So lots of people saying student snapshots and perspectives as well. Very nice. Yeah, I do like that kind of considering, actually, let's look at it from a different angle, from a different point of view. Okay, thank you so much for your contributions. On the slides, when you get sent a copy of them, you will see there are some references if you want to read a little bit more about this, you can have a look at those. And I just want to finish by saying thank you. Thank you to you for all your fantastic participation. It's so lovely to have so many people here from all over the world. So exciting. And of course, thank you to everyone at Macmillan for all their hard work in organising such a great festival. And do come and join us again next week, especially to Will and to Daria and Monica for hosting today. So I'm going to bring Monica back in now. Are you there with us, Monica? Hi.
Yes, here I am. Jade, what a fantastic session you presented, creativity, culture. Those are things that we shouldn't forget, that we should keep on going in a global world. What can we do to foster and to enhance culture? Thank you very much, Jade.
You're very welcome.
And Jade, what about the audience?
Amazing. Just lovely. I was in Dave's session earlier, and I was so excited by how many people were here from all over the world that I actually started writing a list of countries, and I just couldn't finish it. There were too many. It's just, yeah, what a great audience participating so much. Thank you, everybody.
Yes, thank you. And let me see if we have some questions here. Yes, here we have a question for you, Jade. Here we have. Can Jade elaborate how she uses the weather model? I didn't quite get it. Your microphone, Jade, please.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry, I just muted myself while I needed to cough again. I'm just going to go back to that slide. So the weather model it's a set of questions that you can use to, originally it was to reflect on something, but for this, it's about exploring images. So it's using those questions to prompt discussion. So your students might see an image, and you could either give them all of those questions or you give them one or two of those questions. Like this one here, we focused on this one with any image, as long as it's got people in some sort of activity there, just to reflect and explore that image. So what surprises you? Why does it surprise you? What is it about your culture that makes that aspect of the image surprise you? Is that the same in other cultures? Is that the same in this image? Why might that be different? How might people feel about that? So this is about inspiring discussion, facilitating discussion to get students thinking about and exploring their own and other cultures. And hopefully that answers the question there.
Perfect. Thank you, Jade. Here we have another one. Thank you. That I work in a school where students come very humble and vulnerable and violent backgrounds. And they usually say that they do not find the English language useful at all. So apart from having a practical use of English for communication, can we use all these tips, activities, and ideas you are providing us in order to sparkle students' emotions?
Gisela, that's a lovely question. Thank you. That's really, yes, absolutely, you can. The thing about using visuals is they're not just a great way into discussion and dialogue and exploring, but they are also engaging and they're motivating, because if you're working with students that, as you say, they're coming from vulnerable, maybe violent backgrounds, they're already dealing with a lot of challenging things, and coming into a school context where there's so much pressure on them and so much expectation that it's not surprising that it's difficult for them to engage, especially in another language. But the more routes, the more avenues that we can create into their engagement, the better. So my advice to you, Gisela, would be variety, and images are fantastic for that. So bringing it in images, bringing in videos, bringing in different things that are likely to help them engage emotionally. And to, as you say, to spark their emotions, because if they can make some kind of personal connection with the material, and with a lot of these images they can, because you're asking them questions about themselves and their own lives, they can make a personal connection, then they're invested and it's more interesting for them. So they're more likely to want to participate in that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Jade. And here we have another one. Do you use these activities only with multicultural classes, or can we use them with local students?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Audrey. No, not only with multicultural classes. Of course, you can use these with local students as well. And you will have noticed that a lot of the activities go on to a kind of research area. where students are, so they're asking questions, particularly that assumptions one. We make assumptions about an image, and then we say, okay, well, how can we find out? And that's really important. So you might set a research project for students to focus on a specific aspect of culture and a specific culture, place, maybe a national culture. But also, if you have the opportunity to connect your students with other students around the world, then that's really valuable as well. I know that's something that Dave talked about in the last session, and Monica, you talked about that a little bit with the virtual classroom exchange as well. So to answer your question, Audrey, no, you can use these in non-multicultural classes, in classes that all have the same first language as well. Absolutely.
Okay, and I think this is the last one we have. Jade, as regards perspective taking skills, I have noticed that intercultural empathy is promoted within a safe topics framework. Shouldn't we, as educators, expose students to all the controversial visual argumentation through non-safe topics?
Let me just read that again, Ahmed. Perspective taking skills. Yeah, interesting question. Thank you for asking that. I think it very much depends on the context. Because if you're using visuals that are maybe controversial, what impact is that going to have on your students? So if it's going to alienate them and make them disengage from learning, then that's not helpful. That's not valuable. But that will vary in different contexts. And exploring, I mean, for example, we had a look at, we just find that image again. If you remember the young lady, it was the weather model, wasn't it? Talking to a guy who's maybe homeless. That might be really controversial in some cultures. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't explore it, but it does mean that we should be careful and we should be tactful, because the most important thing is not to alienate our students. So you ask the question, should we use controversial visual argumentation through non-safe topics? Depends on the context. And I think what's important to remember here is that we are, as teachers and educators, we have a responsibility to equip our students with the skills that they need to flourish in life. But we are not telling them what to think. We are helping them to explore and find out what they think, and to think about that critically and evaluate it and maybe reconsider some things. But we are not preaching to them. We're not saying this is what you have to think is right and wrong. That's really important. So thank you for your question, Ahmed.
Thank you, Jade. What a beautiful term you used, to flourish in life. Yeah. Okay. Jade, this has been an amazing session. Thank you very much for sharing this beautiful information with us. And well, thank you.
Thank you very much.